In this ever-changing world filled with so much information, it may be hard to tell what's true and what isn't. That's where Verify steps in.
And I guess the first question is this postcard legitimate?
Tonight in a KREM 2 special report, we are taking your questions to the experts.
So my question is is it true that there's a fault line that goes down Division Street?
And getting you the answers. Welcome and thank you for joining us for a KREM 2 Verify special. I'm Mark Hanrahan. Our mission for Verify is to separate fact from fiction from claims made online, social media, in speeches, or even in the news. We want to do our part to stop the spread of misinformation. With the increase in social media, it can be tough to tell what's true and what's not. We want to help our audience to be a more informed and responsible news consumer. Here is that in action. Take a look at your screen. Many of you recently received this postcard in the mail stating you might be eligible for a settlement from a class action lawsuit involving the Washington Department of Licensing. So is it legit or a scam? Let's verify. The postcards were mailed out to more than 500,000 Washingtonians, including to KREM 2 viewer Kim, who wrote to the Verify team, I received a postcard from Garcia v. Washington State DOL, postmarked NYC, saying that I might be eligible for up to a $7,500 settlement. Could you please verify? It sounds like a scam. Our sources to verify this are the Washington State Department of Licensing and Kaylee Boyd, an attorney for the law firm Towsley Brain Stevens in Seattle.
And I guess the first question is this postcard legitimate?
It is. They are real, and they contain pretty important information about how to file a claim if you're a class member in the DOL data breach.
The State Department of Licensing announced in January of last year that roughly 650,000 people were impacted by the breach to its professional licensing system. The personal information, including social security numbers of people with active, expired, revoked, and suspended professional licenses, was compromised.
For a certain number of those professions, it kept those licensees' information in a database called Polaris. And in January of 2022, that database was breached by some third-party hacker, and certain licensees' information, actually over 500,000 licensees' information was taken.
Attorney Kaylee Boyd's firm represents clients in the class action lawsuit against the Department of Licensing. She says while the DOL denies any wrongdoing in the breach, they agreed to pay a $3.5 million settlement, which brings us back to the postcards.
Is everyone who gets a postcard, are they eligible to be a part of the settlement?
They are. So if you received a postcard, it means that according to the Washington State Department of Licensing records, you were a person whose personal information was impacted by this data breach.
So we can verify, yes, the postcards from Garcia v. Washington State DOL are legitimate. If you received one, you have until October 9th to file a claim at wadoldataBreachSettlement.com. If the court gives final approval to the settlement, payments of up to $7,500 will be sent out in October. And many of you have reached out to our Verify team asking what you can do if you don't have a postcard. Here is attorney Kaylee Boyd.
What if you did not get a postcard, but you think you might be impacted?
It's a good question. I mean, sometimes, postcards get lost in the mail. Somebody's postcard got tucked into junk mail and accidentally thrown away. If you received a notice from the Department of Licensing in February or March of last year that you were impacted by this data breach, but you don't receive a postcard in the next week or two, you should contact our settlement administrator, and they have the class list and they can tell you if you're a member.
For more information about how to contact the settlement administrator, just text us the letters DOL to 509-448-2000 and we'll send a link directly to your phone. Now to a new Washington State program that just took effect that will impact most of our paychecks. Here's what we can verify about the Washington Cares Fund.
The first long-term care bill in the United States.
Years after it was passed, the Washington Cares Fund is officially launching. The program aims to make long-term care available to people across Washington State, but how much will it cost you? Noah writes, my boss said my pay will be lower next month because of a new tax. Is this true? Let's verify. Our sources are Ben Vecti, director of the Washington Cares Fund, and House Bill 1087. Back in 2019, lawmakers passed legislation that created the Washington Cares Fund, a state-run long-term care insurance program. Washington taxpayers who have contributed to the fund for 10 years can receive a $36,500 lifetime benefit to help pay for long-term care needs. The program is funded by a payroll tax which goes into effect on July 1st.
It works just like a Medicare or Social Security. You pay in a little bit of every paycheck over your career.
Most workers in Washington will pay a tax of 0.58% of their wages.
So the typical worker is going to pay about $12 a paycheck or $24 a month into WACARES. That's somebody who makes about $50,000 a year. If you make more than that, you'd pay in more. If you make less, you'd pay in less, because it's a percentage of your wages.
So we can verify, yes, most Washington workers will see a deduction in their paycheck starting in July because of a new payroll tax. However, some workers may be eligible for an exemption.
The new types of exemptions are for types of workers who might have had to pay in, but maybe wouldn't have been able to plausibly have a path to being eligible to claim benefits.
Exemptions include workers who live outside of Washington. This could include anyone who lives in Idaho but commutes across the border for work, military spouses and partners, people with a non-immigrant work visa, and veterans with a 70% service-connected disability rating or higher. And it's important to note the exemptions are not automatic. So if you think you're eligible for one, you need to apply as soon as you can. Otherwise, the money will be taken out of your paycheck and you likely will not be able to reclaim it. So if you want more details about how the Washington Care Fund works and you want to calculate just how much money you'll be paying every month, or if you need to apply for an exemption, just text us the word FUND to 509-448-2000 and we'll send that information directly to you.
He says gun violence is the leading cause of death for young people, ahead of car accidents and cancer.
Still ahead, we are verifying several claims made by Washington politicians.
We have seen actually eclipse crashes, actually.
Are guns the leading killer of children in the U.S.? And is fentanyl to blame for the most deaths of American adults? The answers next. For the first half of the year, nonprofit The Gun Violence Archive says there has been more than 350 mass shootings across America, with nearly 1,000 children dying as a result. With that increase in gun violence, many politicians, including Washington Governor Jay Inslee, have stated that in 2022, guns were the leading cause of death in children. But is that true? Let's verify. During a December press conference, Washington Governor Jay Inslee spoke about the increase in gun violence against children.
Today, gun violence, and this is shocking to me, is the leading cause of death of our young people.
Several viewers reached out to us to verify Governor Inslee's statement that gun violence is the largest cause of death in children. Our sources are the CDC, the New England Journal of Medicine, and the nonprofit, the Gun Violence Archive.
And so you're tracking all gun-related injuries and deaths?
All gun-related injuries and deaths.
Mark Bryant is the co-founder and executive director of the Gun Violence Archive, which was created in 2013. Their goal is simple: track in real time the number of gun-related deaths and injuries across the nation. And they do that with a team of 24 researchers in different regions that track things like law enforcement reports, including their social media accounts, along with traditional media accounts. So we asked him about Inslee's claim.
He says gun violence is the leading cause of death for young people, ahead of car accidents and cancer.
And the answer to that is yes. That is accurate. It only the crossing was this last year.
What's the other data show? The New England Journal of Medicine reports the top 3 leading causes of death in children are guns, vehicle crashes, and drug overdoses and poisonings. The CDC data shows gun-related deaths trending up in recent years. Their latest data is from 2020, when 2,500 people ages 17 and under died from gun-related incidents, up from nearly 1,900 in 2019. And in 2020, gun-related deaths outnumbered car crashes by about 800. But since the CDC's data is only available through 2020, we turn to the Gun Violence Archive for the last 2 years.
We know that there's a lot of reasons. You got a lot of kids carrying guns that shouldn't be carrying them.
To be clear, the CDC does include suicides in its numbers. The Gun Violence Archive does not. If they did, their numbers would be higher. But in 2021, they reported 1,573 children were killed in gun-related deaths. In 2022, that number climbed to 1,676, the highest number they've ever recorded.
What do you make of the fact that gun violence last year was the leading cause of death for children?
It's several items. It's there are more guns available. If you have more guns, you're going to have more guns stolen. You're going to have more guns that owners fail to properly stow their guns, so they're easier to steal. You're going to have more kids that find guns, young kids that find guns that dad thinks are hidden, and they're not. A 4-year-old boy knows exactly where they are.
So we can verify, according to the data from the Gun Violence Archive, in 2022, guns were the leading cause of death in kids in the U.S. Another Washington politician has claimed something similar, that fentanyl is now the leading killer of American adults. Here's what we found. The claim's been popping up all over online, including in this newsletter from Eastern Washington Representative Kathy McMorris Rogers, which claims that fentanyl is now the leading killer of Americans aged 18 to 45. Our sources to verify this claim are the CDC, the nonprofit Families Against Fentanyl, the Washington Department of Health, and Trooper Seth Green with the Idaho State Police. Let's start with the CDC. According to their 2021 mortality data, the leading cause of death for American adults was unintentional deaths, which includes accidental drug overdoses due to synthetic opioids like fentanyl. The nonprofit Families Against Fentanyl, using 2020 CDC data, reports that fentanyl is the leading cause of death for American adults. When we analyzed the 2020 data, unintentional injuries accounted for slightly more than 78,000 deaths, with drug overdoses accounting for nearly 50,000 deaths. Of those 50,000, 35,000 drug overdoses can be attributed to the use of synthetic narcotics, which includes fentanyl. But here's where it gets tricky. The CDC doesn't track fentanyl deaths specifically, it only categorizes them under synthetic opioids, which could include other drugs too. So let's look at Washington and Idaho.
What are you guys seeing in terms of fentanyl in the state of Idaho?
Well, we're seeing a massive increase over the past few years.
Corporal Seth Green with the Idaho State Police says in the Gem State, fentanyl has overtaken car crashes as the leading cause of death for adults in the state.
We have seen it actually eclipse crashes, So we saw 353 ODs, majority of which were fentanyl last year, and then only 265 fatal crashes. So we've seen the numbers between crashes used to be the leading cause of death. Now it's obviously ODs.
It's a similar story in Washington. The chief science officer for the State Department of Health said fentanyl is the leading cause of death among adults, accounting for 765 overdose deaths in 2021, more than car crashes and suicides. So while fentanyl may be the leading cause of death for Americans, the claim needs context. But we can verify, according to our sources, the drug is the leading cause of death for adults in Idaho and Washington. And you may be wondering how we go about verifying your question, so here is how the process works. After receiving your question, our team begins the research. In Verify reports, we make sure to use a minimum of 2 sources. We go to the experts on the topic in question to get their insight on that topic. We make sure to use only vetted sources. Those are sources that have been found to be reliable, like a peer-reviewed study or an expert in their respective field, or the actual source itself, like the author of a study. Coming up next, we are digging into Spokane City Code and clearing up any confusion about parking in the city. And what exactly are the watering restrictions in place in Spokane? Several of you have reached out to the KREM 2 Verify team to clear up some confusion in Spokane City Code. Driving down Spokane streets, it's not uncommon to see cars parked on the wrong side of the road. It may be convenient, but is it legal? Let's take a look. Our sources are Washington State Code on the Rules of the Road, the City of Spokane, and the Spokane Police Department. Washington State Code states every vehicle stopped or parked upon a two-way roadway shall be stopped or parked with the right-hand wheels parallel to the right-hand curb or edge of the roadway. This means cars must be parked with the flow of traffic. We checked with the City of Spokane to verify there were no local exceptions, and it turns out Spokane Municipal Code is even more clear, stating, no person shall stop, stand, or park a vehicle upon a public right-of-way other than with the direction of authorized traffic movement. So we can verify, no, it's not legal to park against the flow of traffic in Spokane. However, when it comes to enforcement, Spokane Police Sergeant Teresa Fuller tells Verify officers are not actively looking for or ticketing vehicles for parking on the wrong side of the street. She said city parking enforcement would be more likely to ticket for this, and drivers caught parking the wrong way could face a $45 fine. Well, the start of June brought new water restrictions to the city of Spokane and plenty of questions too. So let's verify what is true about watering and what is false. First, we can verify, yes, there are water restrictions in place in Spokane right now. The City Council passed the new water conservation measures last year. The rules restrict water usage between June 1st and October 1st of each year. You may have seen this image shared by the City of Spokane. It lists restrictions on hours for watering and suggests an outdoor watering schedule broken down by even and odd addresses. However, parts of this graphic may be misleading, so let's break it down further. We can verify that it is true that watering is not allowed during the day between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. There is also a limit on how many days you can water to 4 days a week. However, while the city suggests an even odd watering schedule, the city code leaves it up to homeowners to choose the days that work best for them. There is also no limit on how long you could water, although the city code suggests a limit of 2 hours per day. KREM 2 News viewer Deb emailed the Verify team to ask, will golf courses, parks, and schools be following these same guidelines too? If not, why? Well, Deb, we can tell you there are exemptions that can be made for the Parks Department. Reasons include watering trees or new landscape mitigating fire risks, pools and splash pads, and golf courses and sports facilities. Similar exemptions are available for homeowners as well. We can verify also that there are currently no penalties for people who don't follow the rules.
I know that there are some evidence of faults that have been mapped, underneath and running through Spokane.
It's long been speculated, earthquakes in the inland Northwest. Still ahead, we go to the experts and verify whether there's a fault line running along Division in Spokane. If you have lived in the Pacific Northwest for any length of time, you have no doubt heard the warnings about the risk of earthquakes. The most concerning fault line, the Cascadia subduction zone that runs from Northern California all the way up into Canada. Seismologists have long warned that it has the potential to cause catastrophic damage along the coast. But what are the risks in eastern Washington? Are there fault lines in our region that we should be concerned about? Let's verify. Our question comes from viewer Sergio De Leon.
So my question is that, is it true that there's a fault line that goes down Division Street?
To verify this question, we turn to Chad Pritchard, professor of geosciences at Eastern Washington University, and Harold Tobin, a professor of earth sciences at the University of Washington and director of the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network.
Is there a fault line that kind of runs north to south through Spokane, kind of paralleling Division Street?
I know that there are some evidence of faults that have been mapped, underneath and running through Spokane in that general north to south kind of configuration.
Well, Tobin says the risk of earthquakes, specifically strong, damaging quakes, isn't nearly as great in eastern Washington compared to western Washington. There have been small quakes recorded in Spokane. This map from the Journal of Geophysical Research shows where those small quakes have been detected. The white circles indicate where they happened, and these are all between a magnitude 1.6 and 2.2.
I heard this awful boom, and my bed started to shake.
Felt a big rumble and a pop and just wondered what it was.
You may recall in 2001 when a stronger, nearly 4.0 magnitude quake hit beneath downtown Spokane, causing bricks to fall from chimneys and left visible cracks in walls.
There are definitely north-south faults in our area, but not that I know of that are extremely active.
Chad Pritchard says the more significant fault line in the Spokane area is the Latah Fault that runs along the west side of Spokane, including along Latah Creek. But other fault lines in the region are even more significant.
The biggest earthquakes are going to be coming from Sandpoint area. We have the Lewis and Clark fault zone, and then down south in the Tri-Cities area. And then, of course, off the west coast at Cascadia.
But just because fault lines have been detected in and around Spokane at this point, Pritchard and Tobin don't see a reason for people in eastern Washington to be overly concerned.
Despite the fact that we have some evidence that faults exist in Spokane and that there have been some small earthquakes in Spokane, we don't really see any evidence of something that would be concerning about the potential for a very large earthquake. They can happen and take us by surprise, but really we don't see that hazard in the same way as other parts of the state.
So we can verify, yes, several fault lines have been detected in and around Spokane, including ones that run north to south, but none that our two experts say show a potential for producing a large, damaging quake. If you have questions for me and the KREM 2 Verify team, you can always email us at verify@krem.com, and we will work to get you some of those answers. Well, that is going to do it for this KREM 2 Verify special. For more on our Verify reports, you can catch them on our streaming platform, KREM 2 Plus. It is free to download for Roku and Amazon Fire and on krem.com. Thank you for watching.